We're either going to need the money in 25 years and be really glad we did it, or we're not going to need the money in 25 years and we're still going to be really glad we did it.
You are listening to 5 a.m. podcast. Your morning motivation starts here.
Good morning. Welcome back to the 5 a.m. podcast. I'm your host, Michael Clausen. As you know, many of us start our days while the rest of the world is just dreaming. But today's guest is someone who spent the last 25 years turning those dreams into tangible and tropical realities. If you've ever looked at the horizon and wondered if there's a plan B, a way to diversify your life, your assets, and your future beyond the traditional borders, this episode is definitely for you. We're joined by Michael Cobb, the co-founder and CEO of ECI Development. Mike, we're excited to dive into your journey and hear what you've learned about building communities and living a global life. So welcome to the 5 a.m. podcast.
Wonderful, Michael. Thanks for having me, and good to be with everybody here bright and early. So
Yes,
terrific.
it's always a great day. That early bird catches the worm. Mike, you started ECI over 25 years ago.
Yeah.
What was that spark back then that made you realize people needed a bridge between the dream of living abroad and then the actual reality of it?
Yeah, and in fact, it's interesting, Michael, the ECI is now 30 years old. We started it in
Wow.
1996.
Wow.
But actually, a couple years before that, we started a small mortgage company in Belize because many North Americans would come to, say, Belize, for example. It's where we started, and they would want to buy a property, a home or a condo, and maybe it was $150,000, and they didn't have $150,000. So typically, they would think to themselves, "Oh, well, I'll just borrow some money." Well, no bank in Belize would loan, a foreigner money.
Yeah.
And certainly no bank up in Canada or the United States would lend a U.S. Person money on collateral in Belize. And so there was this big hole in the marketplace, and a lot of people really couldn't bridge their dream, to use your words, between the desire to own a property and the ability to afford it, finance it. And so we actually started a mortgage company in 1994 in Belize. And that eventually took about 10 years. We turned it into a bank, and it's still a bank in Belize. And it's really a mortgage facilitator, right? We work with North Americans buying property throughout the region now, not just Belize,
Wow.
Costa
Okay.
Rica, Panama, the Caribbean, who, folks looking to obtain some financing because the banks down there really still won't lend to foreigners. And most banks in the U.S. would never lend on collateral,
Right.
outside of North America, right?
Yeah.
But what happened, Michael, was I was the guy on the ground. My business partner, he's a lawyer. He's deals, contracts, money. That's sort of his
Right.
domain. I'm the boots on the ground. And as I was looking at the homes and the condos, what I noticed was that a lot of them did not meet our expectations. Folks coming out of Canada, coming out of the US, we'd be like, well, this is great. Maybe it was built phenomenal, right? Concrete, rebar, like it would
Yeah.
stand up to a hurricane, but like light switches would turn on down. The light in the bathroom would be behind instead of over. Door handles would be at different heights. And I just thought, like, we could fix all of this and provide a product to a North American that met their expectations for
Yeah.
the same price, for free. Like,
Right.
none of those
Okay.
things cost any money to fix, right? And that was the genesis of our development company. And we still serve a middle class North American consumer. We have product that starts just right around 100,000 to make it very, very affordable for folks to, achieve that dream, right?
Right.
And have a property overseas that's a good fit for them. Yeah.
Wow. That
Yeah.
sounds fascinating already, just that origin story. And we often hear people will talk about a plan B. And so
Yeah.
in today's global climate, why is having maybe a geographical and financial alternative no longer maybe a luxury, but perhaps it's become a necessity?
I think I agree with you, Michael. It has become a necessity. Politics polarizes, right? And I think more and
Yeah.
more now we're seeing an incredible polarization on the left, on the right. and whether it's, driven by the politicians themselves
Hmm.
or the media or third party international actors. Apparently there's a lot of that
Yeah.
going on too, right? And so you've got this incredible polarization, and when your side is in power, like,
Uh-huh.
you may be happy about whatever's happening, but the reality is that, in the United States, which I'm much more familiar with than Canada,
Hmm.
there's been a lot of executive orders, and I don't know if the same thing's happening there with the
Kind
prime
of.
minister.
Yes.
Right,
Hmm.
right, where they're taking power that was reserved for the judiciary or for Congress, and they're pulling it to themselves, and I hear a lot of people on the right, the conservatives in the US, cheering it on, this is great," and I don't waste my breath to try to remind them that the pendulum will swing to the other side, and those
Hmm.
same powers that have been grabbed will be in the hands of people who you don't like what they're doing,
Yeah.
and so a plan B is I truly believe is absolutely necessary. My wife and 2 daughters, we lived in Nicaragua. We have permanent residency in Nicaragua, but just this past summer, so 6, 8 months ago, we went to Panama as part of our TEAC program. I know we'll talk about that later,
Yes.
but the entire family picked up permanent residencies in Panama,
Oh.
and for us, that's actually a plan C because we have a plan
Mm.
B, which is our permanent residency in Nicaragua.
Right.
Panama as a plan C, could be a plan B, whatever. But we want the ability. Here's the thing that many Canadians and US folks really misthink, right? They
Okay.
think that if stuff hits the fan, they're gonna leave. If stuff hits the fan, I'm gonna leave. And you
Right.
know what? I don't have my passport. Usually I have my passport handy on my desk. Like, your passport is your ability to leave, right? You
Yeah.
can get on an airplane. Canadians can actually go to more countries than US citizens can go to visa
Wow.
free, right? So we get on an airplane, we fly to Portugal, Jamaica, Thailand, pick any country, and you walk up to the counter and they stamp your passport and say, welcome to wherever it is.
Hmm.
But you're getting a tourist visa. And at the end of 30, 60, 90 days, that tourist visa expires. And so you have to leave. Like,
Yeah.
that's the point. Like, the passport gives you the right to exit your home country. And again, US, Canadian, our
Yeah.
passports are pretty good, right? But it does not give us the right to stay somewhere else. And if the
Hmm.
whole point of leaving our home country was because stuff's hitting the fan and we're worried about the direction of things and we don't like what's happening, we
Yeah.
actually don't really want to leave as much as we want to stay. And a permanent residency, and this is my Panama permanent residency that I just got this summer. Uh, Anyway, a permanent residency is what allows us to stay somewhere else for as long as we need or
Hmm.
want. It could be a year or 5 years. It could be the rest of our lives. That's what a plan B really is. And I think a lot, again, we're lulled into a false sense of security sometimes that the US and the Canadian passport gives us. I can leave anytime I want. Yeah, great, but you can't
Right
stay.
now.
So
Yeah.
that's
That's
really
right.
what the plan B is. It's the permission, legal permission to
Hmm.
stay outside your home country for as long as you want or need.
So then you must have run into some mindset barriers with clients over the years. For somebody who's sitting at their desk right now in North America,
Yeah.
what are those first three psychological hurdles they need to clear before they seriously consider living internationally?
Well, that's a great question. I think the first thing is we have to recognize that risk and the perception of risk are two very different things. And the best example I can give is somebody's driving to the airport in a car, texting while they're
Mm.
driving, right?
Hmm.
And they're not worried about that at all. Not worried
Yeah.
one bit. They're texting and driving, right? Some people, they get on the airplane and they're when they're taking off,
Yeah.
white knuckles, right?
Right.
But we know, I have the data from 2022 in my head, 270,000 people were injured in the US in distracted driving accidents, basically texting
Wow.
270,000 people injured or killed. There were
Mm.
47 people killed in or injured in airline accidents in 2022. So you have this risk, which is flying is very safe, and you have
Yeah.
texting while driving, which is very dangerous. But for many people, it doesn't feel that way, right?
Mm.
And so the first challenge, I think, for people is that risk and the perception of risk are two different things. And then sort of the next element, once we get that and we're willing to look at facts, right? To look at data, look at facts and trust those facts to be, right and true, right? The second thing is then to be able to take action and say, you know what? I do understand the need for a plan B. I've thought about it, but what are my next steps? How do I begin to research this? Right? We're
Yeah.
not going to run off and do it. We're going to start the research process, right? And then the third thing is, we need to at some point say, all right, I've done enough research. I've visited a couple countries.
Yeah.
Maybe you've read my book. You've downloaded some other things off the internet. Maybe you've attended a conference or two, whatever it is. But, 6 months, a year, 18 months, 2 years, pick the time frame, but that kind of a time frame. But at the end of some period of time, 12, 18 months, you say, okay, I have enough information. I'm going to make a decision. And I think that's really I think that's the process that people can follow. We're not going to rush into it, not going to headlong
Hmm.
into it, but we're going to begin a very prudent, measured due diligence process. We're going to examine several options. We're going to identify the one or ones, it could be plural, but usually one option that's a very good fit for us. And then we're going to execute. We're going to do it. And because, a lot of people talk about the hurricane's another example, right? You know
Yes.
what? I need to go down to Home Depot and buy a bunch of plywood for my windows in case a
Hmm.
hurricane comes. I need to go to Home Depot. Gosh, I got to go to Home Depot one of these days. Maybe I should go to Home Depot now, right? And then the hurricane comes, it's too late, right?
Yeah.
The time to go get the plywood is months or years
Yeah.
before, so
Right.
right? And the
Yeah.
time to put it up is a day or two before the hurricane's going to hit, right? If you're trying to figure all this out and the hurricane's coming
Hmm.
or there,
Yeah.
it's
That's
way
right.
too late.
Yeah. And
Yeah,
now, not only could we move ourselves to tropical locations, we can move our money to tropical
absolutely.
locations. And your company itself has different kinds of investments. And I love woodworking. It's something that I've talked with guests on the show about. And
Good.
I've always liked trees because not only because of the shade and all the other benefits that we have from them, but they're also a great store of value. So
Yes.
tell us the story behind getting into having a teak plantation.
Yeah. So back in 1998, I was speaking at a bunch of conferences about our mortgage company at the time,
Okay.
helping folks international living types of conferences and so people who were looking at property overseas, and we would come and we were invited by the host organizations to come and talk about the financing. So if somebody wanted to buy that property in Honduras or
Hmm.
Costa Rica or Panama, wherever, we could help facilitate that through the mortgage company. And one of the women who was running one of the conferences that we spoke at pretty frequently, she wrote an article about reforestation incentive programs in Panama. And my business partner and I and four other folks, we kind of got our heads together and we said, like, this is probably a pretty good idea. It's a pretty low cost investment with a very high return on investment.
Hmm.
The only downside, and I think it's an upside, but I think the only downside that I hear from a lot of people is that the time frame is 25 years, right? But this was 1998. My wife and I, we spent a lot of time in Panama looking for a piece of property. I'm the boots on the ground guy. We found the property. We got our money together. We bought a 100-acre cattle
Wow.
pasture. We hired a forestry company to plant it and subsequently maintain it for the last 26, 27 years. And basically we went from little tiny seedling trees to trees that
Yeah.
are, this big around now in
Wow.
26, 27 years. And, I think that I see the 25 years as a really good thing
Hmm.
because it sounds a little, I don't know, I don't like when I say it, but I'm gonna say it. So, I like it because it keeps most people out of the investment,
Yeah,
right?
that
It's
makes
a
sense.
high hurdle. I find it sad at one level. I guess why I hate to say it is because I think it's sad, truly. I think people who don't see that 25
Hmm.
years is going to happen, 25 years is going to happen, right? You
Oh,
might not be
yeah.
around for it. We don't know. We don't know today, tomorrow, right? Today's our gift, right? But 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 someone, probably a child or a grandchild, will be around
Hmm.
in 25 years, or we will be,
Yeah.
and we're either going to need the money in 25 years and be
Yeah.
really glad we did it, or we're not gonna need the money in 25 years, and we're still gonna be really glad we did it.
Right. Yes.
Like, it
And it's
and
true because in our world, we're thrown into the 4 to 5 year political cycles.
yes.
We're thrown into the microwave meal cycle,
Yep.
the fast food. No, you don't even have to get out of your car. And ladies and gentlemen, if you don't like that drive-through, just park in one of the designated stalls and they'll bring you your food. It's
Exactly.
like remote control for the television and your meals. When we can break out of that almost evil mindset of the instantaneous and the what's in it for me right now,
Right.
we realize that there's so much more life ahead of us. I would like to dig in a little bit more to this process because
Absolutely.
I love
Yes.
gardening and I love trees. And, we're taking a tree out right now that's been there. It's damaged. It's got to go. And we've already planned of what's going to go in next. And we know that a diligent man or woman, they'll plant a tree for the next 3 or 4 generations,
Absolutely.
especially when it comes to fruit trees and things like that. So, can you get into a little bit more of the nuts and bolts of what it actually took to get this crop of tree from seedling to harvest?
Absolutely. Couple things, right? There's a great saying, the best time to plant a tree was 20
Yes,
years ago.
that's right.
Next best time is today.
Yeah.
And the other thing is, I think, true gentlemen and gentlewomen, right? I mean,
Yes.
to whatever, true gentlemen and gentlewomen, they plant trees that they'll never eat the fruit of nor sit
Yeah.
under the shade of, right?
Yeah.
Because we do that for the future generations,
Yes.
so those are good wisdoms, right? Those are two very
Hmm.
powerful wisdoms that tie into this. But from a very practical nuts and bolts standpoint, we looked for the property in Panama, there really are no listings, so we would literally drive from farmer to
Wow.
farmer and ask if they had property for sale, if they knew anyone, and it took about 4 or 5 bumps, but
Hmm.
we found a farmer whose cousin had a farm for sale. We went and saw the cousin, and sure enough, he was willing to
Wow.
sell his 100-acre cattle pasture. We bought it, and meanwhile, before that, by the way, this was started the research in 1998. This was long before Google, long before really internet in any real sense.
Hmm.
So I live about 80 miles west of Washington, D.C. So I drove down 2 times to the Library of Congress, sat there all day, got as many resources, books, periodicals that I could possibly have delivered to my table,
Yep.
and read them, and
Right.
photocopied some stuff, and went back a couple weeks later because I needed to know the questions. I needed to know enough to be able to ask intelligent
Mm.
questions of the 3 companies that I was going to interview to be our forestry manager. Let me
Mm.
be very clear up front. In fact, one of the things in my book is we don't know what we don't know.
Yeah.
And that's kind of a humility when we walk into any new business venture. And so I knew I didn't know anything about it, but I also understood that I'd better be able to ask really good questions. And so
Yes.
I did this research. We went to Panama. We interviewed 2 of the 3 companies. One of them didn't really make the muster at all
Okay.
on the due diligence, but 2 of the companies were solid forestry management companies. They'd both been in business for 6, 7 years at that point.
Mm.
And we interviewed them. We hired one of them called Heo Forestal. They actually helped us identify the property because soil conditions and
Mm.
lots of
Okay.
geological factors actually impact whether your teak is going to be high quality or
Oh,
not.
is that right? Wow.
Yeah,
Okay.
you need well-drained alluvial soil. That's an important factor.
Interesting.
Elevation, rainfall. That the area of Panama that we went to has the 2 of those: rainfall and elevation and temperature. But the actual type of soil, the alluvial, well-drained kind of thing, is important. So
Mm.
they helped us identify the property. They planted the 100 acres of teak trees, and then we contracted them. We retained them to manage the plantation for this past 26, 27 years now. And you start with so let me use numbers I
Yes.
know. we
Yeah.
we uh we we took that plantation after we'd set it up. It was maybe 10 years into it, and we broke it up into quarter-acre parcels. And, each quarter-acre parcel is 1/10 of a hectare, basically. It's all in hectares there. So a quarter acre is like plus or minus like 1% or something of a
Yeah.
of a
Okay.
tenth of a hectare, right? So
Yeah.
we just use that as an easy number. And so we broke the farm up, the 100 acres, into 400 quarter-acre parcels, and each quarter-acre parcel starts with 100 trees at the planting,
Oh,
and
wow.
yeah, so it's a kind of an interesting this is so they plant the trees on a 1 square meter grid, right? 1 square yard.
Okay.
Every corner
Yeah.
you plant a tree, and the idea is that you're overcrowding them, and you force
Mhm.
the trees to grow fast, straight, and tall
Ah,
to get
okay.
sun. And then in year 3-ish, 3, 4, but whatever, you come in and you cut about 40% of the trees out. You just cut them out and you let
Is
them
that
rot
right?
because there's
Wow.
no commercial value to them. Um, now you're down to whatever, 60 trees per quarter acre. Then the trees are in years 7, 8, 9, that, and again, depending on growth and what's
Mhm.
happening, you cut like another 40% of what's left, right? So now you take another, whatever, with that 30
Wow.
trees out. So you're
Okay.
from 60 down to
Yeah.
30, all right? Then you just move into this very slow selective thinning. If a tree breaks or blows,
Hmm.
whatever,
Mhm.
twists or whatever, those come out. And by the end, you end up with 23 to 25 trees per quarter acre, and those are the trees that you ultimately harvest in the end.
Wow.
So it's a very scientific process, and the forestry company, they take care of things if there's any kind of they put in fire breaks, they keep them trimmed, which is important because you keep trimming the low
Yeah.
branches off as the tree gets
Right.
taller, so you create this tall, straight trunk that's your lumber, of course.
Yeah.
They do the thinnings, and it's been a wonderful process, and so now, Michael, we've because we sold out of the first 400, and we're now into our third plantation in
Wow.
Panama because the teak itself, 2 parcels of teak qualify you for a residency in Panama.
Is
So it
that
doesn't.
right?
Yeah, yeah, so 2
Wow.
teak parcels, and they're just under 10,000, so call it 20,000 for your teak parcels and about another 7, 8, call it 8 for your legal and government
Hmm.
fees. For
Wow.
28,000 US, this is a US dollar number,
Yeah.
you can actually have 2 parcels of teak and a permanent residency in Panama, and, like, you can bring a spouse and children in. There's
Wow.
some extra, legal and government fees on that, but
Hmm.
the one investment qualifies you for yourself and
Wow.
dependent families. So I think at this point we've helped maybe 400 or 500 people obtain
Wow.
residency in Panama with about 1,700 quarter acre parcels, delivered to folks. So it's
Oh, that's really good news. I like that.
it's phenomenal. Yeah, it's phenomenal. And we're now we did our final thinnings last year. Well, no, actually 24. We did our final thinnings in
Okay.
24. We built a sawmill. That took us about 2 years to build a
I saw that.
sawmill.
Yes.
And so now we're taking the logs that we did in our thinning, and we're turning it into lumber, which our first container of lumber will go out
Wow.
to a distributor in the United States in April of this year. And our
Hmm.
very first, sort of retail product examples, and we're just playing with it a little
Okay.
bit,
Yeah.
are coming off as well. So, we've really moved from just being a timber business to actually now a manufacturing and lumber business as well. So
Thanks for watching the show. Just a reminder that you can get all of our resources, other episodes, and read our blog posts at 5ampodcast.com. I'm going to stick on this teak for a bit, but can you
okay,
explain
yeah,
how this green gold, as you may call it, fits
yep,
into a diversified portfolio for someone seeking long-term wealth? I wasn't even
absolutely.
expecting to ask you that question, but you have piqued my interest, my friend.
Well, good, Michael. Thank you, and good for your listeners as well, right?
Hmm.
Because
Yeah,
most people would never even hear about an
right.
opportunity like this, right? Unless you're reading some very nichey newsletters or bumping
Yeah.
into us at a conference or something, right? And so your listeners are very fortunate to have you exploring this
Oh,
idea
thank you.
for them with
Yeah.
them, right? Thank you, by the way. Um, the thing about timber generally, and we'll stay on teak specifically, but
Sure.
just
Yeah.
timber generally, again, this long period. What if it's pine in the United States? It's 15 years. If
Yeah.
it's teak, it's 25 years. If it's mahogany and some of the other species, it's 30, 35, 40 years, right?
Wow.
But this long investment time frame, right, to get a yield, to get a return on investment
Hmm.
is an incredible barrier to entry. It's just a psychological barrier. I loved your example about the fast food and the remote control.
Yes. Yeah.
We've really brainwashed most investors. I mean, look at the stock market, quarterly reports,
Yep.
annual dividends, right? I mean, so we've brainwashed investors to say, well, I better get something in a month or a quarter or a year, or I can't do it.
Yep.
It's a high hurdle of entry, but they're actually cutting down teak specifically at a rate of 8 to 10 times faster than anybody in the world is replanting it.
Wow.
Okay. I mean, you just
Wow.
look at supply and demand. Just look at
Yeah.
just simple economics. They're cutting it down 8 to 10 times faster than anybody's replanting it. Imagine what that's going to do for price. And if we
Yeah.
look at the last 53, 54 years since 1972, um, the average price of teak lumber has gone up 5.5% a year for 54 years. Every year, I mean, it's an average, but over 54 years, 5.5% a year. And so
Hmm.
as we continue to cut more than we plant, and people don't want to plant it because they have to wait too long. That's their
Yeah.
thought process,
Right.
right? It just creates more of a supply and demand imbalance, which should, I mean, nobody knows the future, continue to push that price up by whatever 5.5% or more. And the other thing about timber, and again, teak specifically, is that it doesn't matter what's happening in the economy. I love the fact that it is decorrelated to anything really
Hmm.
as a
Yeah.
growing asset. Now,
Right.
right? Because if there's a recession, if there's a big political upheaval, if there's a war, the trees just simply keep growing. They just grow, grow, grow.
Yeah. Right.
Now, when you go to harvest, now you're going to engage the marketplace again, right? Because it's teak, anything is only worth what somebody's willing to pay for it. And so if all of a sudden we're getting to year 25 and the bottom falls out of the teak market because, for
Hmm.
whatever reason, guess what? You just let your trees grow for 3 or 4 or 5 more
Hmm.
years until
Yeah.
the market rebounds, right? Commodities cycle, we know that. Sometimes they're up, sometimes they're down. And that 54-year record would be this, right? It'd be up and down over 54 years, but if you
Hmm.
straight line it, it's up, right? But if you happen to be harvesting or wanting to harvest in one of these dips, just let your trees grow a couple more years and they'll be worth more because there's more wood,
Right.
right?
Yeah.
And they picked up that other backside of that curve again. So
Yeah.
I love the fact that it's not correlated to the markets in any way
Hmm.
during the growth period, and then, you have flexibility on harvest when you enter the marketplace
Right.
to sell that commodity.
Yes. Yeah. And what a blessing it is too. And this is literally being fruitful and multiplying
Yep.
by
Literally.
planting trees, literally fruitful and multiplying.
Correct.
And as I like to say, we're created by a creator to be creators.
Yes.
And we're
These
created
days.
in that image, to have the image of God, but in human form. We're talking about a few different countries, and I've mentioned four of them at the top of our conversation.
Right.
How do investment climates and maybe the vibes differ between, let's say, Nicaragua and Belize and Panama?
Great question. I always like to preface this conversation with what I call the general conditions.
Hmm.
If somebody is looking for a home overseas, a property that they plan to use significantly, whatever that is, maybe it's a snowbird property, maybe they're
Yeah.
going to use it a lot for vacation and family vacations, or they're going to live full time. I always suggest strongly that folks take the idea of investment out of
Yeah.
their head and throw it
Okay.
away because
Okay.
where you live is a heart decision. Do you
Mm.
like the view out your front window? Do you like your neighbors? Is the store, or the restaurant that you like to eat at, or restaurants you like to eat at, are they close by? Right? Like home is a heart decision. Investment
Yeah.
is a head decision. And so now I'll answer your question from
Sure.
an investment standpoint. Yeah,
Right.
each of these countries is very, very different, and they're really on a different level of the development path of progress. And so you've got a country like Nicaragua that's not very popular, right?
Hmm.
It's the least developed of these countries in some ways. It's the least popular for sure, and that has to do with
Hmm.
politics more than anything
Okay.
else. And so what you see there is you see prices that are very, very extremely unbelievably low when you compare them to, say, Costa Rica, the neighbor to the
Hmm.
south of Nicaragua. Like
Yeah.
literally, you could be 20 miles and the property in Nicaragua would be one quarter the price of the exact same property, same ocean, same sun, same sunset,
Wow.
same, different political structure. Nicaragua, Costa Rica, the prices can be 3, 4 times the difference in 20 miles. And so if somebody said, "You know what? I don't care about cash flow as much as I care about asset appreciation. You know, I'm in my 40s or 50s, you know, I wanna buy this, I wanna rent it out for as much as I can." You're not gonna have the cash flow because it's not as popular, say, in Nicaragua, right? But over the next 10, 15, 20 years, I think there's a strong likelihood that popularity will change and
Hmm.
that asset will, you know, go up in value 2, 3, 4 times. And if you can make a 2, 3, 4 times profit over, you know, 10, 15, 20 years, that's a very nice return, right? Your
Yeah.
cash flow won't be as great. On the other hand, somebody says, you know what? I think I'd rather just, you know, pay a little bit more for it, but I want cash flow, right? I want predictability of income, right? And so you look at a popular country like Belize, for example, which is very popular. It's English speaking. It's part of the Commonwealth, right? So a lot of similarities make it a very comfortable place for a first time offshore investor. I call it the easy button for a lot of reasons.
Okay.
And you'll pay more for the asset. Like, you're not gonna get the super deep discount you would get on an oceanfront property, say, in Nicaragua, but you're still gonna get a phenomenal price compared to anywhere in the United States, Florida, California, Texas, you know, an oceanfront, you know, property for, you know, sub $500,000, which would be, you know, again, 10x in Miami. It's the same ocean. It's the Atlantic Ocean. It's the Caribbean. Whatever. It's the Caribbean,
Hmm.
right?
Yeah.
It's kind of the same. But in Miami, you'll pay, you know, 10 times that number. So
Yes.
is there still room for it to go up? Yes. But is it, you know, is it super inexpensive? No, it's not.
Hmm.
But because it's popular, it's going to cash flow sooner and better. And as it becomes more popular, which it will, and becomes a more known destination, you will see asset appreciation. It just won't be as dramatic as a place
Right.
like Nicaragua. And
Yeah.
so we really counsel people. In fact, I think I have a whole chapter in my book about this specific idea. And I want to come back to the lifestyle for just a
Hmm.
moment too,
Yeah.
because if you're thinking about a vacation home or a snowbird or a full time home, the place, the level of development, level of popularity of a country actually matters too,
Hmm.
because less developed countries are a little more rough around the edges. They can be a little more raw. And a place like Panama, Panama City, for example, I mean, it's kind of like Miami in some ways.
Yeah. Right.
Yeah. I mean, it's very advanced. It's super, like, tons of skyscrapers and every restaurant you can imagine. The Uber service is instant and inexpensive. And so if
Wow.
somebody said, you know, I'm looking for a place to live that's pretty, you know, kind of almost, you know, almost first world, right? But
Right.
Panama City delivers a lot of. If somebody says, you know, I like it a little bit raw. Personally, our family lived in Nicaragua for 14 years. We loved the roughness. We loved the rawness. We found it to
Hmm.
be refreshing. And it's interesting because when you strip away a lot of what I would call the commercial stuff or the
Hmm.
developed, what you end up with is relationships with people because you don't have all the stuff, right? And
Right.
so what's left when you strip the stuff away is us as people. And we found that the relationships we had with other people, Nicaraguans, other expats, you know, just an incredible community, were rich in ways that we'd
Hmm.
not found anywhere else. And I think that has to do with, yeah, but you know what? When we first moved there in 2002, you know, our water was out, you know, once a week. It'd go off for a few hours. Our electric was off once in a while. You know, you can either have a generator, you can have solar, you can
Hmm.
just suffer through it, right? I
Yeah.
mean, but but you have to know going in that it's gonna be a little rougher. Today, that's
Yeah.
probably not really the case, although the electrical grid in Nicaragua still, still goes off once in a while. So, it's, give and take, right?
Yeah. No, that's good. And interesting that you mention Miami. Our top three cities for downloads and streams in the United States is Brentwood, California,
Yeah,
then
okay,
Miami,
okay,
Florida, and
yeah,
then would you Kennewick? I don't know why Kennewick, but Kennewick, Washington. And
okay,
the only reason I mentioned that is we got to talk about location, and our real estate friends will say location, location, location. So I just
yeah,
gave there's three top locations for 5 a.m. podcast, but
yep,
when ECI selects a location for a new community, what are the non-negotiables that you look for in terms of that government infrastructure and culture? Because they're all
yeah.
different between Brentwood, Kennewick, and Miami.
Yeah. Well, I think the non-negotiables are very few, but they're truly non-negotiables. And two of them come to mind. One is rule of law. Rule of
Mm,
law, right? You can't have any kind of arbitrary anything. If it's a contract, it's a contract. If it's between me and a local, the contract is the contract. It doesn't matter who they are. So
mhm,
rule of law is extremely important. One of the reasons people like Belize so much is that it's English common law, which is very
yeah.
familiar, and English is the official language of Belize, so all
Mm,
contracts are legal in English. If you go to Costa Rica, Panama, for example, it's civil law, which is unfamiliar, although Quebec has civil law. Uh,
mhm.
and so it's a different legal system, which first is a little bit different. And the 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 contracts are in Spanish, they're legal in Spanish, and you can get a translation, but the legal documents, the Spanish documents, so you're dependent upon a really good translation, right? And
Mhm.
so that tends to, make people a little more nervous, although in fact, I would say by and large, most of our customers have purchased in and own in civil law countries, because it's not a big deal, but rule of law, really important. And the second thing is that the country must have clear title and be able to pass clear title to a buyer.
Mm.
And so we won't work in Honduras is a great example. We've done some funding there. We've worked with a few folks who've done development there, but we as a company won't do development
Mm.
because anything over, I think it's a 4/10 of a hectare or something, call it an acre,
Oh,
just round number,
okay. Yeah.
something like an acre. Anything over an acre has to be owned by a Honduran.
Oh,
Now,
wow.
yeah, yeah, right. It's in their constitution, right? And it's around the borders, but
Okay.
the ocean is a border, right? So,
Yeah.
and so the problem is that, for us as a developer, we'd come by, 500 acres, we'd have to put it in a Honduran corporation. The directors have to be Honduran,
Oh,
and that's a
mm.
pretty big risk, we
Yes,
believe,
that is.
because right. But our bank will finance because when another developer, whether it's a Honduran or
Mhm.
anyone else, they take it and they break it up into a condo or a home on a half an acre. Well, actually, the person who gets that can have title to it because it's
Ah,
below the constitutional maximum,
interesting.
right? And
Yeah.
so it allows us to work as a bank in Honduras or as a finance institution in Honduras, but not as a developer. So it's kind of a
Wow.
funny thing. So here's what I would say: if you found a property in Honduras that you loved, right, then as a consumer, as an end buyer,
Mhm.
no problem, assuming it's under an acre,
Yeah.
right? But as a developer, we wouldn't develop there for the other reason. But
Right.
generally,
Interesting.
we those are the two non-negotiables: rule of law and clear title.
Wow.
Too.
And some pretty important things of title,
Yeah, yeah.
which I know that our Canadian listeners seeing that take place uh, with UNDRIP happening in Canada
What is
of
that, Michael? I don't know
it's
what
a
that.
it's a UN program where there are certain areas of Canada where the native groups did not have a direct treaty with the British Crown. While
Okay,
they do have their allotment of land, the Crown owns the land that they're on. But what's happening right now is the courts are starting to give Aboriginal title to land that has what they call fee simple title. So places like Richmond and the lower mainland and other places, there's this legal quandary now of who actually owns the land. Does the
Wow.
mortgage company and the owner, who they thought was the owner, did they have title to the land, or did the Aboriginal communities have title to the land? And some people are not getting their mortgages renewed
Right.
because of
Yeah.
this situation. So it's,
Right. Uncertainty, right? I mean,
yeah,
yeah,
the
right.
volatility. So I think there was something when there's blood in the streets, buy land. Is that right?
I've heard that.
Something like that. So
Yeah.
all of this political stuff and economic stuff that we're seeing, it's leading and has led people to be what we now refer to as digital nomads.
Yes.
And
Correct.
how is the rise of this remote work changing? And certainly my wife and I would fall into this with the work that we do, changing the way that maybe you design your communities, or the demand has grown compared with 10 or 15 years ago.
Sure. Well, what's kind of interesting, Michael, is that we've always designed from a community basis. We've known that when people retire, our primary market for the first 25 years, I guess, really was a baby boomer retiree, someone who was going to
Oh,
be
wow. Okay.
retiring, leaving their job, their social network, leaving their
Yeah.
home community, their church, their softball league, whatever it was, right? People they knew, and moving someplace new. And our company always focused on how do people make new friends when they arrive to this new place. and
Yes.
and you can certainly do it through the physical infrastructure. We picked a type of urban planning called new urbanism, and there are just
Hmm.
some really simple things. You put sidewalks on both sides of the street, you put trees, get your trees in real fast, get fast growing trees, and then you have every home has to have a front porch. And so what happens
Oh,
is if it's less than 5 minutes, people will walk to
yeah.
get from, say, you cluster, you put high density, you put lots of green areas, but you kind of cluster people tight so that people will walk 5 minutes to the store, to the pool, or to the restaurant. And as they walk on the sidewalks, which are shady, right, they'll pass other people and you'll say hi, because you have to say hi to somebody you're
Yes.
walking by. Or if somebody's on the front porch and the third time you walk by, you're like, well, I haven't seen you guys down at the tennis courts. We're
Yeah.
Bob and Mary and whatever, right? And so community can actually happen. So by starting out that way 30 years ago now, whatever. I
Yeah.
mean, 30 years ago, right? Um, we kind of already baked that into the cake, which is great. But here's what's interesting. You mentioned digital nomads. What we're
Yes.
seeing, the trends we're seeing now are people who thought they would have to wait until they retired to play golf,
Mm.
surf,
Hmm.
fly fish,
Yeah.
snorkel, dive, whatever it is they wanted to do. And so what we're seeing now is people in their 50s and 60s moving overseas ahead of retirement because they can, like you mentioned, you and your wife.
Hmm.
We could certainly do this from anywhere, right?
Yeah.
And so we're seeing that. And those folks tend to be buyers. Those folks in their 50s and 60s are coming. Maybe they're liquidating a home in the
Hmm.
States or in Canada, or maybe taking a second mortgage to suck some money out of it, or
Yeah.
borrowing from KeyBank, whatever, it doesn't matter. But they're buyers. But here's what's really interesting. The true, what I would call true digital nomad, the people in their 30s and 40s, maybe 20s, 30s, and 40s,
Hmm.
most of those folks don't have the assets to actually make an acquisition. Yet
Right.
they are some of the most prolific digital nomads. And so what that really offers is two things. It offers an incredible opportunity to be a landlord overseas, to own a property that you would rent for 3 months, 6 months, a year to digital nomads on a pretty, ongoing
Hmm.
basis, not the nightly rentals. I mean, the
Yeah.
nightly stuff has been there forever, right? But now we're talking about being the landlord to a digital nomad, which
Right.
is really a new marketplace. And so I think we're certainly, as an organization, we're doing it. We're
Right.
building product that is for rent now as opposed to for sale, and we still have for
Hmm.
sale as well, right? But I think there are opportunities for investors who want to have a property that maybe they'll use in 10 years or 20 years, or maybe
Yeah.
they're never
Right.
going to use it. Maybe it's just simply a great property that they're going to rent to digital nomads. So
Right.
there's some dynamic things happening in the marketplace, as we speak, which are really exciting. Yeah.
Yes. Well, that's good. And I see why the clock on the wall. We are getting close to the end of our conversation and we got to keep going. I've got
It's been
a
fun.
plethora of
Yeah.
questions for you. But,
All right,
ladies and
I'll
gentlemen,
do my
we've
short
got a
answer.
comment section.
Okay.
So please let us know what you're thinking about these Plan B locations. We'd love to hear from you. Michael, we need to know how people can get in touch with you.
Sure. Well, anybody who's listening who's ever thought about going overseas or at least maybe even
Hmm.
thinking about moving overseas, I want to give them a copy of my book, Michael. And
Okay.
all they have to do is send an email to book@ecidevelopment.com.
Okay.
Book@ecidevelopment.com. And we'll send you a coupon. It's on Amazon, but we'll send you a coupon. You can go over to Amazon, use the coupon, and download the book for free. It's my gift to your
Oh, thank you.
listeners and to anybody who's thinking about a property overseas, because the
Right.
title of the book is How to Buy Your Home Overseas and Get It Right the First Time.
Mm,
It's got 30 due diligence questions that we as North Americans would never think to ask. It's got a whole chapter on titles and the different types of titles. It's got a chapter on culture shock. It's really a due diligence book for anybody who's thinking about moving or investing. It can be
right.
investment as well overseas. And the more people who get it right, the more people who are going to have a wonderful experience, and that's what we want. We want people to
Oh, that's
have a
good.
a
Absolutely.
smooth, wonderful experience when they transact overseas.
Yes. Now, another part of the digital nomad experience in common parlance really is about crypto. And in El
Yep,
Salvador, correct me if I'm wrong, but you became the first developer to accept cryptocurrency. How is the Bitcoin native lifestyle changing the way maybe nomads are managing their finances, but also their residency in Latin
yep.
America?
Yeah, we did. We've not actually done any business in El Salvador to date.
Oh,
We have
okay.
a potential business partner there. Bitcoin was made legal tender in El
Hmm.
Salvador back 3-4 years ago now. Brilliant
Yeah.
move on the part of President Bukele, applauding
Hmm.
him for that. But we, maybe 8 years ago now, took our very first Bitcoin transaction for teak. Michael, it
Oh,
was for
wow.
teak. A guy
Okay.
wanted to buy
Cool.
a bunch
Love
of
it.
teak. And so
Love
we
it.
we took Bitcoin. And so we were early in the game with Bitcoin. We've spoken at some of the Bitcoin conferences. I love the concept. I love the fact that Bitcoin specifically is transactional, which I think
Hmm.
gives it real life forever. Well, forever is a long time, but
Yes.
for longevity in the marketplace, as opposed to coins that have just investment or whatever. They're speculative,
Yeah.
right?
Right.
Bitcoin's transactional, and it's a utility coin. So I think there's a lot of reasons. It's one of the reasons we take it,
Yep.
but we like it,
Right.
and big fan of it.
Yes, absolutely. And good fee structure. And of course, right now it's down, but by the
Yeah,
dips, as they say. So,
absolutely.
Mike, this has been an absolute masterclass in global residency, but also global diversification. And it's rare to find someone who combines that high level investment strategy with the boots on the ground experience to actually lay the bricks and mortar. So, thank you so much for sharing
Thank you
your
for
journey
having me,
with us.
Michael. Yeah.
Oh man, I wish we had more time because I have way more questions. I guess that just means we'll have to have you back for part two.
Let's do it again
Y-
sometime. Yeah.
yes. And so, ladies and gentlemen, for those of you listening or watching, if your someday is starting to sound and feel a little bit more like it should be today or tomorrow, well, you need to check out what Mike and his team are doing. So, whether you're looking for that retirement destination, you want a vacation home, you want to rent to some digital nomads, maybe get some hard assets with hardwood lumber, as
Yeah.
in the teak, head
Yeah.
over to ecidevelopment.com. There's not an S after the T, ecidevelopment.com. That is their central hub where you can explore their communities in Belize, Nicaragua, and Panama. You can also find out information on their discovery tours, which we didn't even get into. Uh, and it just gives you maybe sheds a little bit of light on some of the plans or hopes and dreams that you have. So, ladies and gentlemen, thank you for being here. Thank you for sharing this with a friend or three. And until next time, please seize your days, enjoy those sunrises and sunsets, and maybe they'll be in the tropics so you can enjoy those beautiful adventures. I'm Michael Klassen, and I will see you next time on the 5 a.m. podcast. Thanks for watching the show. Just a reminder that you can get all of our resources, other episodes, and read our blog posts at 5ampodcast.com.